Wealth is a mindset, like we like to say on this channel. And in order for you to build lasting wealth, it's going to take consistent action in order for you to create the financial freedom that you desire. My name is Carmen.
And I'm Darius. And because wealth is a mindset, that means that every one of us has a different perspective or a different way of going about building wealth for ourselves and for our family.
Yep.
And what we're going to do today is we're going to share with you our blueprint for how we plan on building wealth.
Now, it's also important for us to be completely transparent. It has changed. It has evolved, just like how growth happens. Mm-hmm. And we recognize that there were certain things that we were doing before that we either wanted to amend or take on, whatever the case may be. So it is really nice to be able to share this with you because we've come to the point where we really feel like this is a solid foundation or blueprint, if you will, for us and for anyone who is maybe on a similar path that we're on.
Right. So first thing first, as we go through this, one thing that we had to do in our way of thinking or in our mindset is we had to remove the word retirement from our vocabulary. The reason being is retirement for us just means that we need to be a full-time investor. That's what retirement is for us. So instead of saying retirement, what we're going to do is refer to our final step as being a full-time investor, because one thing that happens over time, or one thing that doesn't happen, is our dependence on cash flow in order to maintain our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what, when we think about retirement, we want to continue to produce. Mm-hmm. And for us, being a full-time investor is the end goal for us, so that we can continue to produce and allow our cash flow process to just be on autopilot.
Right. So the very first step in our process is we have to have an income. We have to earn money initially in order to have our process work for us. So the very first thing that we want to do, our first goal, our first priority, is to have 12 months of savings in our possession. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to have 12 months of savings sitting in our checking account. It's a series of, or in our savings account. It's a series of having our savings account and cash flow life insurance policies that have cash value available that we'll use in the event that we do need to tap into those funds.
Yeah, and it's really just, this step is about liquidity. Mm-hmm. That's really what it is. Now, if you're new to the Wealth Nation channel, I'll give you a quick synopsis, but Darius and I, like he just alluded to, we like to use whole life insurance policies as a way to store cash. And so in this instance, we have a certain amount of money that's in a savings account, not a lot, because we don't like to keep a lot of money in the bank, because we know if it's not moving, meaning if it's not earning anything, we want to keep as little money in the bank as possible. And the rest of it is going to be in a whole life insurance policy.
Right. And the biggest thing for that is the fact that inflation is so high, it basically makes our savings account, the interest that we're earning in our savings account, irrelevant.
Yeah.
So what we did instead is we used a life insurance policy just for this particular benefit for us, and that gives us the ability to have access to that money when we need it.
Yeah, and again, it's just about liquidity. That's really all it is. It has nothing to do with the actual 6 to 12 months, or whatever the case may be. Yes, it is that amount, but it allows us to be liquid and allows us to just kind of, again, have our personal expenses on autopilot and know that there is a stash available should we ever have an opportunity come up. The stash is there for that purpose.
Right. Now, the second thing, this helps us be able to do two different things. It allows us to have cash that's liquid, and the second thing for us is family protection. We have children, and what we want to make sure that we do is, in the event something happens to either one of us, we don't want the income to be missing from our household, because we still have a plan to build wealth, even if we're not here to physically do it ourselves. So family protection is really, really important to us for building wealth for our family. Yeah,
and with the family protection too, I think we come at it from a different perspective. So it's important for us to break that down as well. With the protection piece of it is, when we look at life insurance, it's not just income replacement. It's a wealth building mechanism that allows us to multiply the income that was coming in, right? This isn't just about having a term policy that'll take over the mortgage payment, so somebody won't have to pay the mortgage, God forbid. This is about building lasting wealth, so that if somebody does pass, there is significant cash flow that has come into our household that we can now multiply for the generations to come.
Yeah. And so they can also follow the plan that we have established for how we plan on doing that.
Yeah, because and the reason why I want to harp on this is because a lot of times we just get insurance to check the box of the mortgage, but we don't think about having multiple policies or expounding our efforts and maxing ourselves out essentially from an insurance standpoint to get as much coverage as possible. And we want you to start thinking about that because you do have the opportunity to have multiple policies to get to the threshold and continue to challenge the threshold of what your insurability is, so that if something were to happen to you, you're able to leave a significant wealth for your family.
Right. And a few years ago, we interviewed Garrett Gunderson on our channel, and what he mentioned is buying your net worth in cash value life insurance. And I really like how he put that because it just stayed in my mind all this time as to how we can actually do it for ourselves, and implementing it here is key to how we plan on building our wealth this year.
Yeah, and this is really the second point that we're talking about, like so family protection, family coverage, and it just goes back to having the cheat sheet of recognizing that if you just put a small injection of capital into your premiums every single year, how that multiplies in death benefit to cover your family. And a lot of times we think that we have to just work and let our income speak for it, but no, we're going to let the policies do the heavy lifting. We're going to be able to deposit so much every single year in annual premium, and the death benefit will speak for itself. And again, we're not even talking about the living benefits that come with whole life insurance. We're specifically just speaking to the legacy protection that we're insuring, which again is step number 2. So the first step is we make sure that we're liquid from a personal standpoint. The second point is now we're trying to figure out how to cover our family as much as we possibly can and bring in as much life insurance into our household as possible.
Right. Now, we spoke about life insurance in our first 2 points, and if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, definitely click on the link below to learn more about whole life insurance and how we implement it in our system. Now, the third point that we want to make is the fact that we're aware of our 12 months of savings. Our 12 months of savings is made up of all of our expenses minus how much we set aside from savings. So right now we put 30% of our income in savings and 70% of our income goes to pay expenses. We only need that 12 months of that 70% of our income, because that's how much we come out of pocket every single month or annually for our particular lifestyle. So for the third point, what we need to do is have a multiple of our annual expenses invested so that we're able to make money. This is the part where I think we need to go into a little more detail about how we plan on doing this. And what our goal is let's say if our 70% of our expenses is, let's say, $50,000, for example. What we are planning on doing is having 30 times more invested. Now, 30 times more than your annual expenses, it may come off as being aggressive, or it may come off as being like intimidating. But the nice thing about it is we have the power of compound interest that can work in our favor. And the nice thing about that, let's say what we're doing is we're investing in 5 different asset classes so that we can have diversification in our investments. What those 5 classes are is we have cash, we have commodities, we have equity, fixed income, and real estate. Those make up the asset classes that we want to have diversification across. Now, the nice thing about it is because we're still earning income, the money that goes into our investment, we don't need immediately. So the interest that we earn in our investment goes back in to our system so that we can earn more money. That's the power of compounding. So a 30-time multiple of our annual expenses doesn't take as long for us to get to because we have the power of compounding working in our favor. All
right. So let's unpack this, Darius, because I understand what you're saying. I want to make sure that our viewers understand what you're saying, because it has taken us a long time to get to this point and to fully comprehend what you just said in like a matter of seconds. So let's just talk about, let's start from the beginning. You said, for example, if our expenses are $50,000, 30 times that we need to have that invested.
Right. So about 1.5 million.
Yeah. So we take 1.5 million and over time, right? This isn't anything that's going to happen tomorrow. The goal is to get to have a 1.5 million invested across the 5 asset classes.
Right. So if we were to disperse it evenly, what we would have is we would have $300,000 under the cash. We would have $300,000 under commodities, $300,000 under real estate, $300,000 under equity, and $300,000 under fixed income.
Exactly. And now understanding that concept of taking basically a pie chart of understanding that we have 5 different asset classes that we want to invest in, and then looking at 30 times our expenses, and now being able to apply that. Now, why, Darius, are we coming up with the 30 times our expenses and specifically looking at our fixed as the formula to create that number?
Right. Now, the reason why we want that is because if we're successful as we are successful in our investing, because not only if we invest in these asset classes are we able to keep up with inflation, but it allows us to live off a percentage of our portfolio. And what that provides for us is cash flow, not a nest egg that we need in order to maintain our existing lifestyle.
Exactly. Okay. So pause. So what we're saying is, if we look at the snapshot of our expenses right now, and again, let's call it $50,000. If we backdoor it and use a specific formula to go, okay, in the future, how much do I need to live off of based off of the specific expenses that I have? How much money do I need to have invested, which is that 30 times $50,000 to give us to the 1.5 million? All of that money needs to be invested. Now, why do we have to look at that number? And why is that important? Is because if we want to live off of investments, remember, what is our ultimate goal? We want to be full-time investors. So if we want to live off of our investments and make our investments work for us, we have to be able to create some sort of formula where we understand how much money we need to live off of our investments when it comes time to our we said we're not going to use retirement, but our full-time investing days, right? So we don't want you to be intimidated by these numbers or to think, oh my God, this is crazy. But we're just making you think about what it is that you're trying to do. Because a lot of times when we think about our financial goals, it just stays at personal finance. It just stays at a budgeting tool, and we don't look at our net worth. We don't look at the coverage that we have for our family. We don't look at what retirement for you may look like. And so we had to get really serious, especially in this inflationary environment that we're living in now, is recognizing, okay, what do we need to start really double downing on, and where can we be more aggressive with our investments to ensure we have a certain percentage that will be available to us when we decide that we want to start investing full time. Right.
Now, one thing I also want to discuss is in that fourth point, if we only need about 3% or 3.3% of our portfolio for our income, anything above and beyond, we get to reinvest that back into our system, which allows those funds to continue to compound also.
Yes. So really quickly though, I don't want to interrupt you. Where did the 3.3 come from?
Well, I just figured that 3.3% is about the same thing. If I was to backdoor it into how much we need for our expenses, that gives us roughly about the same amount that we need for expenses.
Yes. Again, just making sure we're connecting all the dots. So really, it's just a math equation, right? We always talk about do the numbers and understand what it makes sense for you. So we did our own numbers, and this is what makes sense for us. So in order for us to live off our investments, we only need to take a small percentage, 3.3% to be exact, of what our investments are yielding us in order to pay for our expenses. And what you were just sharing with us, Darius, is and anything on top of that, any continued growth that we continue to get from these investments are just going to go back into more investing, which is going to continue to fuel this engine for us, right? So that's why when we talk about understanding your numbers and living below your means and having a relationship with your money, that's why it's so important for you to do that, because you need to be able to have these conversations and to be able to do some of these equations to understand, what do I need to live off of? And if you don't have that relationship with your money, then it's time to get real and really understand what's going on, because again, like we keep harping on, inflation is not waiting on anybody. And if you don't have a plan,
and if you don't have assets to protect you against inflation, then having cash is really going to be to your detriment.
Yeah, it's not going to do anything for you. And the thing that we keep talking about with assets is assets are things that put money in your pocket. Liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. So you need to, again, look at that relationship that you have with your finances. And do you have more liabilities? If so, we need to start figuring out how to remove those liabilities and start creating more assets for ourselves, because the assets are going to be the inflation protection or the wealth erosion protection, because when you invest in assets, they continue to appreciate, meaning they continue to be worth more money. So the more assets that you have under your belt, the better you'll be prepared when it comes to tackling inflation every single year.
Right. And that's why we continue to have the conversation during situations like this on the rich continue to get richer.
Yeah.
The reason being is because they have assets. They have the asset protection against inflation, where the people that don't, I mean, we continue to lose money because of it.
Yeah, I just had this huge visual, because we were talking about literally when the negative connotation that some people have with the wealthy is they continue to get richer and woe is me. It's still in the same spot.
Yeah, it's by default that this happens.
Yeah, it's on autopilot because if you're creating assets, they're going to appreciate whether you do anything about it or not. That's the point of investing in lucrative assets, is for them to work for you.
Right.
And that's why when inflation continues to take off, those assets continue to appreciate. And if you have liabilities, you're continuing to dig yourself into a further hole, which is why our classism is going to continue to create the separation. And you're going to wonder, why don't I have any money? And looking at the wealthy as greedy or whatever it is, when they were the ones who were just more strategic with their money.
Right. Don't hate the player.
Hate the game. hate that they know the game and you don't. Again, it's just, I really hope that you all are following us and tracking us with this message that we're sharing with you, because this is how we got hip to the game of assets and understanding, like, whoa, back up. You think you're doing good,
right,
but you're not doing good until you got 1.5 invested in assets.
Right.
So now that started to challenge us and go, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to make this work so that we can curb this whole inflation game, so that we can make sure that when we become full-time investors, that we're loving life, right? Mm-hmm. Because the worst thing that happens is when we have clients come to us and say, Darius and Carmen, I was retired and I had to come out of retirement because I could no longer afford to be retired. We hear that too many times, and that we've known that personally through family members, where we have to be so focused on our money and having a sound partnership between Darius and I, so that we can make sure that these things don't happen to our household.
Right. And regardless, what we have to realize is that there's rules to money, and there are basic rules to money that a lot of times we don't know or don't follow, because it is hard. It is hard initially to only live off a percentage of your income, because of how much money we're putting in savings. Yes, that is difficult. But what's going to happen is, what you realize as you get older is, at some point you're not going to have a choice. So why don't you make the choice now, so that you can prepare yourself for when that day comes.
That just, it hurt me when you just said, because it's real. You said at some point you're not going to have a choice.
So get prepared.
So do you want to make that choice now and be in control of what's inevitably going to happen to you? Or do you want to get kicked in the butt and have to have,
and not have a choice,
and then not have a choice?
Right.
Which one do you want?
Now, I know a lot of us, for in this example, 1.5 million or 30x multiple of your income is very intimidating. But the nice thing,
not enough, depending on where you are.
But the nice thing about money is the fact that compounding is something that can happen naturally, as long as you don't use the money before it's time. You see what I'm saying? Because as your income continues to come in, you should not be tapping into what you have for your retirement, because the more you tap into it, the less that money is working for you. So you lose it twice. Not only do you spend it, but you also lose your opportunity to earn money on that money.
Oh man, can we throw some context to that? So the biggest context that I think resonates is your retirement accounts. How many of you dip into your retirement accounts because you need immediate cash right now? So what Darius just said, golly, Darius, what he just said is you lost it twice because you just spent the money, meaning it's gone. And then you lose the ability to compound the money that should have been in that account. So how many times have you dipped into your retirement account, sir or ma'am? And how has that affected the growth of your retirement account? Now, the thing that we talk about all the time again is the beauty of compound interest is the money has to sit in order for it to work. And if you continue to dip and dip and dip because something happened and you weren't prepared, remember going back to that point number one where we said we have liquidity so that we don't have to tap into these assets for liquidity. We have a plan for that. So make sure that you're following again, because we've created this system for ourselves to be essentially dip proof in the event things come up, right? Because we're realists. Just because we talk about financial education doesn't mean that we have all the answers either, but we've seen a lot of stuff go down.
Yeah.
And we're learning from seeing all the things that have gone down and even our own financial experiences. So we're trying to put different pads and gates up to make sure that, again, we have a fortress for our financial freedom.
Right. Now, back to the 1.5 or the multiple of your expenses is the fact that, yes, it may be intimidating, but if you allow compounding to work, you don't have to physically be the one to put all that money in there yourself. What you can do is allow compounding to work. As you put money in and you earn interest on that money, put that interest back into your investment so that you can earn more money on it. That way it gives you the ability to not have to physically put the $1.5 million into this investment account yourself. One very important part of wealth building is discipline, having the ability to see that money growing and not touching it because you know your future self needs it more. So it's really important for us to practice discipline as a part of our wealth building mindset. And by doing these 4 things, I guarantee you'll really be able to benefit from compounding because of the mindset of building wealth.
I think one thing that you said that just struck me is you said your future self needs it more. And in the world that we live in with immediate gratification, it's hard to picture what our future self is. What is that future self going to need? What is money going to look like? But I think that the biggest way that you can start protecting your future self and planning for that is to create a vision that you don't want to compromise on, and determine what is that going to look like for you individually. What are you going to be doing in 20 years? What specifically do you want to do? Do you want to be sipping pina coladas on the beach? Do you want to be in the mountains somewhere? What does that look like? And create that vision so that every time you go to think about tapping into those funds and affecting the compounding, you'll have that vision of, wait a second, how is this going to keep me from having my XYZ dream? And again, it's just about planning. So the things that we're talking about, they're not unattainable. I can't stress enough that it's just about creating a plan and working that plan and using the beauty of compound interest to work for you. Let that be the leverage that's going to help push you through the inflationary years where everyone else is going to be complaining about how they're behind, and you're like, actually, I'm ahead. So what are you going to do starting today? What have you taken from this video that you can start thinking about and wrapping your mind around the plan that you're going to create? Because we've gone through 4 very distinct points as far as having liquidity, right? Which is making sure that you have money available, that while you're building this amazing plan, that if something comes up, something arises, an investment opportunity comes up, or if you have to replace a car, for example, you have coverage for that. And you don't have to dip into any of your assets or take away from them so that you can continue to move forward. The next thing that we were talking about is your family coverage. Right? We're all guaranteed to pass at some point. And so what are you doing? What mechanisms have you put in place to make sure that your family is covered times 10, 20, however much insurance that you can get to give them as much financial freedom as possible by just having small investments inside of your premium? Sometimes people tend to look at the premiums as this burden or this thing that I have to pay. But if you put it into perspective of, if I'm going to pay $100,000 a year on life insurance and my family gets 10x that, what does that mean to you? That this should no longer be looked at as a burden, but an asset to you. In addition to all of the amazing benefits that come with whole life insurance. And then the third thing that we mentioned, we were talking about having at least for us, a 30 times multiple of whatever your annual expenses are, because that's going to allow you to have the blueprint to understand how much money needs to be invested across all 5 asset classes that we've mentioned, to ensure that you can then figure out what is the percentage that you need to live off of in order to have that as cash flow. And that's literally the last point, figuring out what that percentage is, so that you can make sure that come the days that you decide what retirement looks like for you, you already have a foolproof system, and you've been working the system in order for everything to work out for you.
Right. And what retirement should look like for everybody, at least in my opinion, is that you're a full-time investor, because your need for money isn't going to change because you retire. So we need to make our side hustle investing, so that at a certain point, what we're able to do is do it full time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like there's this notion that when I retire, I don't need any more income. I don't know why it is. It boggles my mind when we kind of have that conversation, because I find that life gets more expensive
when you have time.
When you have time, right? You want to do all these amazing things and experience all these things, but then all of a sudden, if you're on a fixed income, that changes. Mm-hmm. So think about these things. Is a fixed income desirable to you when you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want? I don't know. It doesn't work for me.
It sounds like you have a limited experience of what you can do.
Exactly. And then you've worked all this time to have a limited experience.
Right. Now, we focused in on investing as far as what our ultimate goal is. But in order for us to get there, what we have to do is we have to have a really good first step in order to get this thing started. So for us, that is how we manage our money. And for you, it's going to be the exact same thing. No matter where you are, I think these steps, regardless of your income, allows you to get to the point where you can live off of basically the interest from your money.
Yeah.
Now, if you want more information on how to manage your money, as an example, how we manage our money, check out this next video where we talk about that very thing.
And don't forget to own your own lifestyle,
or someone else will.